July 27, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy, the 88 millimeters round tore into the Sherman's hull with a scream of tortured steel, a sound that almost always meant instant death for the 5 men inside. From his gun sight, the Panther gunner of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich waited for the familiar result. Penetration achieved. Target destroyed. The Panther rolled forward 20 meters, its driver seeking a clearer shot at the next American tank. But the expected fireball never erupted. Instead, the Sherman's turret began to rotate. Its 76 millimeters gun swung toward the Panther, steady and deliberate, hunting its attacker. The German loader, already halfway through grabbing another shell, hesitated. Confusion froze him in place. That tank should have been an inferno by now. A steel coffin. Everything the crew had been taught said so. Training manuals, years of combat from Russia to North Africa, and hard-earned experience all agreed. Once an American tank was penetrated, it burned. Ammunition cooked off. Crews died within seconds. But what the Panther crew witnessed that morning was something German forces had completely failed to anticipate. A quiet revolution in armored warfare. The tank they had hit was an M4A3 76 W Sherman, fitted with wet ammunition stowage. Its shells were housed in double-walled bins embedded in the hull floor, surrounded by 38 gallons of liquid fire suppressant. When hot fragments pierced the armor, the liquid absorbed heat and smothered ignition. The catastrophic ammo fires German gunners had relied on since 1942 simply didn't happen. This wasn't an experimental feature. Every Sherman built after January 1944 carried it. The odds of fire after penetration had collapsed from an estimated 60 to 80% to just 10 to 15%. That morning in Normandy, the U.S. 2nd Armored Division attacked with 104 of these improved Shermans. Not a single German intelligence summary, no briefing from the Waffen-SS. Not even frontline rumors had warned tank crews that their most basic assumption about American armor was now dangerously outdated. This transformation had its roots in disaster. February 14, 1943. Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The valley floor was littered with burning American tanks. M4 Shermans had become rolling crematoriums under fire of German 88 millimeters guns. Of roughly 300 U.S. tanks committed, 183 were knocked out, most consumed by violent ammunition fires that killed entire crews in moments. British operational research teams reported that 65% of destroyed Shermans burned completely. American studies were even more grim, with figures reaching 80% in some engagements. The U.S. Ordnance Department's Tank Automotive Center conducted a systematic examination of every wrecked Sherman recovered in North Africa. Their conclusion was unambiguous. Gasoline wasn't the primary killer. Ammunition propellant was. More than 70 rounds were stored in open racks throughout the fighting compartment. When armor was penetrated, red-hot fragments ignited the exposed propellant instantly. The fix emerged through practical, iterative engineering. During a tank board meeting in November 1943, a DuPont chemical engineer proposed a radical idea: surround the ammunition with liquid. Early concepts bordered on absurd, including flooding the fighting compartment like a submarine. But refinement turned the idea into something both simple and elegant. Ammunition would be placed low in the hull, away from common impact zones, inside double-walled containers filled with liquid. By December 1943, the Press Steel Car Company in Pennsylvania was retooling its production lines. On January 3, 1944, the first M4A1 76 W Sherman rolled out. The W stood for wet, a small letter marking a massive shift in survivability. Outside factory floors and engineering offices, almost no one understood what it truly meant. The Germans, especially, would learn the hard way. Trials at Aberdeen Proving Ground confirmed the idea far beyond what its designers had hoped. Under controlled conditions, technicians used captured German 75 millimeters and 88 millimeters guns to fire directly into Sherman ammunition racks. The results were unambiguous. Conventional dry stowage ignited in 73% of penetrations. Wet stowage caught fire in only 15%. Motion picture footage of these tests classified until 1963, made the contrast impossible to ignore. Dry racks exploded into towering columns of flame, while wet stowage produced only brief wisps of smoke, quickly smothered as liquid spilled across the damaged compartment and extinguished the heat source. The redesign was thorough, not improvised. Each ammunition bin was built as a set of concentric, double-walled cells, each holding 10 rounds. The cavity between the walls was filled first with water, then later with a water, glycol mix, and finally with a purpose-designed chemical solution known as amidamp. The chemistry mattered. Plain water froze in winter conditions. Glycol prevented freezing, but accelerated corrosion inside the bins. Amidamp, an ethyl sodium potassium phosphate compound, solved both problems while preserving effective fire suppression. The M4A375W carried 100 rounds stored low in the hull floor, with 4 additional ready rounds, all protected by a total of 37.1 gallons of suppressant. Sherman variants armed with a 76mm gun carried 71 rounds, shielded by approximately 36.6 gallons of liquid. The system increased vehicle weight by roughly 900 pounds, but the gain in crew survivability was dramatic. By April 1944, 130 M4A176 W Shermans had reached Britain. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions each received 52 of these tanks, though they were not immediately committed to combat. Concerns over crew training on the new 76mm weapon and the logistics of supplying its ammunition delayed their use. As a result, they did not participate in the D-Day landings. Their combat debut came during Operation Cobra. At 0938 hours on July 25, 1944, Operation Cobra began with the most intense tactical aerial bombardment ever employed in direct support of ground forces. As the dust and smoke from the carpet bombing lifted, American armored units surged through the breach near St. L. At the forefront were elements of the 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions, now fielding the first wet-stowage Shermans to fight in Western Europe. German panzer formations, shattered by the air attack, positioned surviving Panthers in hastily prepared ambush sites. After-action reports recovered when Panzer headquarters was overrun revealed mounting confusion. Panthers were scoring penetrations against Shermans at favorable ranges, yet many of the American tanks either continued fighting or withdrew under their own power instead of erupting into flames. The German crews did not realize they were facing M4A376 W and M4A176 W tanks from the 67th and 33rd Armor Regiments. Of the Sherman's German gunners believed destroyed, a significant number returned to service within 48 hours after field repairs. Those that did burn were usually hit in the engine compartment rather than the fighting space. The ammunition protection system had performed exactly as intended. Defensive plans based on assumptions of rapid American tank losses proved fatally flawed. Sherman survived in numbers the Germans had not anticipated. Counterattacks launched against what were believed to be weakened spearheads instead collided with armor formations still largely intact. Behind this outcome lay meticulous wartime engineering. Each ammunition rack was built from precisely fabricated double-wall containers, separated by gaps approximately 1.5 inches. Small spaces that made the difference between instant destruction and survival. Each of these spaces held roughly half a gallon of liquid for every 10-round ammunition cell. By wartime standards, the pace of development was astonishingly fast. Early systems tested in October 1943 relied solely on water. While they confirmed the basic principle, they also exposed serious flaws. Water froze in winter conditions, corroded brass cartridge cases, and encouraged bacterial growth in stagnant compartments. Introducing ethylene glycol eliminated the freezing problem but made corrosion worse. The final formulation, known as amidamp, resolved all of these issues. It consisted of ethyl sodium potassium phosphate, combined with corrosion inhibitors and biocides. The resulting solution remained fluid down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, prevented rust, suppressed bacterial activity, and proved even more effective at quenching fires than water alone. Each tank required an initial fill of the system, followed by routine inspections through dedicated access ports to ensure proper liquid levels. Ordnance Department records show the system outperformed expectations. When armor-piercing fragments breached an ammunition bin, the liquid immediately poured into the compartment, saturating exposed propellant before ignition could occur. Even in cases where small amounts of propellant did ignite, the liquid prevented flames from spreading to adjacent rounds. As a result, damage that once meant the total loss of a tank often became a survivable incident requiring only limited repairs. A single design change fundamentally altered battlefield outcomes. Meanwhile, at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground, German technical intelligence teams were conducting detailed evaluations of American tanks captured in Tunisia, vehicles built before wet ammunition stowage was introduced. Their analysis focused primarily on M4A1 Shermans from the U.S. 1st Armored Division seized near Sidi Bouzid in February 1943. German engineers produced exhaustive reports cataloging every aspect of the Sherman's construction: armor layout, metallurgy, engine output, transmission behavior, and, critically, ammunition stowage. Intelligence summaries circulated to Panzer formations included precise diagrams showing ammunition racks positioned in the sponsons above track level, accompanied by recommendations to target these areas for maximum destructive effect. This guidance hardened into doctrine. Gunnery schools from Putlos to Paderborn instructed crews to aim deliberately at Sherman sponsons. Range cards issued to anti-tank units marked these zones in red as priority targets. The lesson became so deeply ingrained that when hits in these areas no longer triggered fires, German crews assumed their shots had simply failed to strike the ammunition. The timing could not have been worse for German forces. Their most comprehensive analysis of the Sherman was completed just as American factories began rolling out fundamentally redesigned vehicles. Every subsequent intelligence update referenced the original evaluation as authoritative. Reports on the front describing unusually resilient Shermans were dismissed by staff officers as exaggerations from exhausted troops. Behind the scenes, the transformation of U.S. tank production in early 1944 represented a level of industrial coordination rarely seen in warfare. At the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, production shifted from the M4A2 to the M4A3 and then incorporated the new survivability modifications without halting the assembly line. Between February 1944 and March 1945, Fisher produced 3,371 M4A3 75W tanks. Accommodating the wet stowage system required a complete redesign of the hull floor to allow ammunition bins to sit beneath the turret basket. This demanded new stamping dies, revised welding fixtures, and reworked assembly sequences, all executed while maintaining continuous output. Replacing the fully rotating turret floor with a partial basket, necessary to allow access to ammunition stored in the hull, forced a complete redesign of the turret traverse system. Hydraulic piping, electrical wiring, and mechanical control linkages all had to be rerouted around the newly positioned ammunition bins. Nothing about the change was superficial. It altered the internal architecture of the tank. The Pressed Steel Car Company in Pennsylvania reached comparable production achievements, beginning manufacture of the M4A1 76W in January 1944. The firm produced 3,426 tanks by July 1945. Their task was especially complex, as the wet stowage system had to be integrated alongside the new 76mm gun. This larger weapon required turret alterations, different ammunition types, and careful rebalancing of weight within the vehicle. By June 1944, American factories had fully transitioned to producing Shermans exclusively with wet ammunition stowage. The changeover was so seamless that German intelligence, still relying on captured vehicles examined a year earlier, remained completely unaware that the basic survivability of American armor had been transformed. Normandy's hedgerow country unintentionally became the proving ground for this innovation. The close, restrictive terrain forced tank combat at distances where German guns could easily penetrate Sherman armor. Yet American losses behaved in an unexpected way. Tanks were being knocked out, but not lost. Maintenance battalions of 3rd Army reported that during Operation Cobra, 67% of disabled Shermans were recovered and repaired. Of the tanks that would previously have burned beyond salvage with dry ammunition storage, roughly 70% returned to service thanks to the new protection. This unseen regeneration of armored strength disrupted German calculations at every level. Commanders complained in their war diaries that American tank forces seemed to possess endless reserves. Panthers were scoring hits and even penetrating armor. Yet too many engagements failed to produce permanent kills. American recovery crews were towing away tanks German gunners believed destroyed, repairing them, and sending them back into battle. The German staff system for estimating enemy strength, based on permanent losses caused by ammunition fires, collapsed under these conditions. Major General Maurice Rose's 3rd Armored Division led the breakout with roughly 200 of the improved Shermans. Over 7 days of sustained fighting, the division advanced nearly 100 miles, fought dozens of engagements, and maintained momentum despite repeated German counterattacks designed specifically to annihilate American armor. The German response came in the form of Operation Luttich, the wartime counteroffensive, launched on August 7, 1944. 4 panzer divisions were committed with the goal of severing the American advance. The plan rested on a critical assumption that U.S. armored units were exhausted and severely depleted after their rapid push forward. German intelligence estimated American tank strength at only 60% of its actual level, failing to account for the large number of Shermans recovered and repaired thanks to wet stowage. At wartime, the 30th Infantry Division, supported by tank battalions equipped with modified Shermans, broke the offensive's momentum. The 743rd Tank Battalion, in particular, absorbed repeated assaults by SS and Wehrmacht panzer units, holding firm where German planners had expected collapse. Despite taking repeated penetrations, the battalion held together and remained combat-capable throughout the 6-day engagement. The Battle of Ericourt in September 1944 offered the clearest historical proof of how radically the situation had changed. On September 19th, the German 113th Panzer Brigade launched an attack against American positions, confident they would achieve a prize and annihilate U.S. armor through superior gunnery. The opening phase appeared to confirm those expectations. Panthers and Panzer IVs scored numerous hits on Sherman tanks of the U.S. 4th Armored Division, often at ideal engagement ranges. Multiple penetrations were reported, yet the outcome unfolded in a way German commanders had not anticipated. Rather than collapsing or withdrawing with heavy losses, the 4th Armored Division responded with a powerful counterattack. The numbers reveal why. During the fighting around Ericourt, the division recorded 151 Shermans knocked out. Of those, only 41 were permanent losses. The remaining 110 vehicles were recovered, repaired, and returned to combat, most within a matter of days. German intelligence, treating all 151 as destroyed, concluded that the 4th Armored should have been rendered ineffective. In reality, the division never lost its offensive capability and continued operations without pause. The battle also marked a turning point in senior American thinking. General George S. Patton, initially doubtful about the value of the 76 mm Sherman, reversed his position after Ericourt. 3rd Army thereafter accepted only wet stowage Shermans equipped with a 76 mm gun, recognizing that increased firepower combined with dramatically improved survivability produced a far more effective fighting vehicle. As autumn 1944 advanced, a second generation of improved Shermans entered frontline service. The M4A3E8 EZ8 incorporated combat lessons learned in Normandy and Lorraine. It featured a redesigned suspension, wider tracks to offset the added weight, improved mobility, and further refinements to ammunition stowage that enhanced crew access and handling. Deliveries to combat units began in October 1944. Alongside it appeared a specialized assault model, the M4A3E2 Jumbo, which incorporated wet ammunition stowage from the outset production in June 1944. With frontal armor up to 4 inches thick and turret armor reaching 6 inches, the Jumbo could withstand punishment that would have destroyed earlier Shermans outright. Combined with ammunition protection, these tanks achieved survival rates that puzzled and frustrated German observers. By November 1944, 1st Army had deployed 105 M4E2 Jumbos across multiple tank battalions, while 3rd Army fielded 90 more distributed among 6 battalions. These heavily protected tanks led assaults against fortified positions, absorbing damage that would previously have wiped out entire armored companies. Germany's final major offensive in the West, Operation Walk am Rhein, launched on December 16, 1944, was planned on dangerously outdated assumptions about American armored vulnerability. German planners believed U.S. tank losses would mirror the pattern seen in 1943. The operation depended on the rapid destruction of American armor reserves. Panzer commanders calculated that concentrated attacks would dismantle U.S. tank units piece by piece. What they failed to understand was that American armor no longer vanished when hit, and that miscalculation would prove fatal to the offensive. All of these German calculations rested on the assumption that Shermans remained as vulnerable as they had been earlier in the war. Once protected, however, the Sherman survived at rates no German planning model anticipated. As a result, operational timelines unraveled. This reality confronted SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Paper head-on during the Ardennes fighting. Leading the camp group of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Paper encountered American armor near Stillmont on December 19, 1944. His Panthers scored multiple close-range penetrations against Shermans of the 743rd Tank Battalion. Under pre-1944 assumptions, these hits should have eliminated American resistance. They did not. Despite confirmed penetrations, U.S. tanks continued to fight. In post-war interrogations, Paper repeatedly expressed frustration that American vehicles remained operational after damage that, by all previous experience, should have destroyed them outright. The 761st Tank Battalion, the African-American Black Panthers, demonstrated the same advantage throughout their 183 consecutive days of frontline combat, including during the Ardennes campaign. Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers, later awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously, embodied the impact of improved survivability. On November 19th, his Sherman took 2 direct hits that penetrated the hull. In earlier models, such strikes would almost certainly have ignited the ammunition and killed the crew instantly. Instead, the ammunition did not burn. Rivers, though wounded, continued to fight, and his crew survived impacts that would once have been fatal. As 1945 began, German forces increasingly captured intact Shermans equipped with wet ammunition stowage. During Operation Nordwind, multiple M4A3, 75, W tanks from a 43rd Tank Battalion were seized near Hatton and Hilschheim. In several instances, German crews operated these captured vehicles for days without understanding the importance of the liquid-filled ammunition bins. By that point, the Waffen-SS and Wehrmacht technical intelligence apparatus had largely collapsed. The few specialists still active were consumed by last-ditch wonder weapon projects rather than systematic analysis of enemy equipment. Even if frontline troops had recognized the significance of the modification, no functioning mechanism remained to evaluate and disseminate such intelligence. The scale of the transformation was later quantified by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office in its post-war study ORO T-117. Before modification, Shermans burned in 60 to 80% of penetrations. Wet-stowage Shermans ignited in only 10 to 15% of cases. This reduction created an invisible multiplication of American armored power. In a battalion of 50 Shermans suffering 30 penetrating hits, dry ammunition storage would have resulted in 18 to 24 tanks destroyed by fire. With wet stowage, only 3 to 5 would burn, leaving 25 to 27 vehicles recoverable and reparable. Instead of being combat ineffective, the battalion remained operational. Across the European theater, this arithmetic advantage compounded strategically. Conservative estimates indicate that the modification prevented catastrophic fires in at least 1,000 tanks, saving roughly 5,000 trained crewmen and preserving the fighting strength of dozens of armored battalions. German planning never accounted for this shift. Operational plans throughout 1944 and 1945 continue to rely on obsolete assumptions about Sherman vulnerability. This systemic error, repeated across thousands of engagements, contributed directly to Germany's defeat. Post-war interrogations and memoirs confirm the depth of the intelligence failure. Not a single German wartime account references awareness of wet ammunition stowage. Otto Carius, credited with destroying more than 150 enemy tanks, wrote extensively about fighting Shermans and Tigers in the mud without noting any unusual resistance to fire. Ernst Bachmann's description of his famous engagement likewise contains no mention of surprise at Sherman's surviving penetrations. The change that reshaped armored warfare remained invisible to those who paid the highest price for misunderstanding it. Regimental and divisional histories compiled by veteran associations offer further confirmation. Accounts from Panzerlehr, the 2nd SS Panzer Division, and the 116th Panzer Division contain no acknowledgement of increased Sherman survivability. These were not official, sanitized publications subject to wartime censorship, but private recollections written by veterans for fellow comrades. The silence is telling. The failure to identify wet ammunition stowage stands as one of the most comprehensive intelligence breakdowns of modern warfare. It was not caused by a single mistake, but by the convergence of multiple systemic failures. German technical assessments of the Sherman were based on vehicles captured before the modification existed. Once wet stowage Shermans entered service, German forces were largely on the defensive, limiting opportunities for controlled technical evaluation. Observations from frontline units rarely reached analysts due to organizational dysfunction. Technical intelligence was fragmented across competing agencies that shared information poorly. Chronic shortages meant captured enemy vehicles were often pressed directly into combat use rather than studied. Cultural overconfidence in German engineering superiority further reduced urgency for detailed enemy equipment analysis. Above all, the modification's invisibility was decisive. Wet stowage did not alter the Sherman's outward appearance. It required no new tactical behavior. It made no dramatic announcement of its presence. German intelligence conditioned to search for visible revolutions. Thicker armor, larger guns, new silhouettes missed a quiet transformation taking place inside American tanks. The story of wet stowage carries enduring lessons. Technical intelligence must be continuously refreshed. The enemy analyzed yesterday may not be the enemy encountered tomorrow. Innovation does not need to be dramatic to be decisive. Incremental improvements that solve specific, lethal problems can outweigh sweeping redesigns. For military engineers, wet stowage represents exemplary design philosophy. Identify the exact failure mode, develop a practical solution, and deploy it immediately at scale. A good solution available now often outperforms a perfect solution that arrives too late. For intelligence organizations, the episode is a warning about analytical blind spots. Capabilities that appear impossible or unworthy of attention may be precisely the ones that decide a campaign. Intelligence failure can be as lethal as mechanical failure. In warfare, information is as critical as ammunition. The Sherman's wet ammunition stowage system reduced the likelihood of catastrophic fire by roughly 75% and saved thousands of Allied lives. Yet its greatest success lay in remaining undiscovered by German forces during the final, decisive year of the war. From its introduction in January 1944 until the war's end in May 1945, every major American armored operation fielded substantial numbers of improved Shermans. German units fought them from Operation Cobra through the defense of the Reich itself, capturing and even operating hundreds without grasping the significance of what had changed. American engineers designed the system to preserve crews, not deceive opponents. Yet its invisibility multiplied its impact far beyond what raw statistics suggest. The modification validated the American approach to wartime engineering. Practical solutions, implemented rapidly, proved superior to Germany's pursuit of technical perfection. History records wet stowage as an important technical improvement that contributed to Allied victory. More accurately, it should be remembered as the modification that won by remaining unseen, achieving success through enemy ignorance as much as through American engineering. German tank crews fought the wrong enemy, using obsolete assumptions and outdated tactics, and paid the price. Wet stowage did more than save American lives. By preserving armored strength and sustaining momentum, it shortened the war itself. In this hidden advantage, multiplied across thousands of engagements, lies one of the most remarkable and least known stories of the Second World War, a simple internal modification that changed the course of armored warfare while remaining invisible to those who needed to recognize it most.